Malik Johnson walked purposefully through the sun-drenched streets of downtown Los Angeles, his heart racing with anticipation. Today marked a momentous occasion, the day he would finally purchase the car he had always dreamed of. But for Malik, this wasn't just about acquiring a luxury item. It was a personal triumph, the culmination of years of relentless hard work, sacrifice, and overcoming countless barriers. Despite his multimillionaire status and the reputation he had earned as the founder of one of the most disruptive tech startups in Silicon Valley, Malik had always kept a low profile. He wasn't the type to flash his wealth around. His wardrobe was proof of that. Faded jeans, a plain white t-shirt, and a pair of well-worn sneakers that had carried him through countless days of hustle. Malik could have easily stepped out in a designer suit, but that wasn't him. Today, however, he allowed himself one indulgence, buying the car of his dreams. The luxury dealership he was heading toward was known for catering to the elite of Los Angeles, the kind of place where celebrities and CEOs casually dropped hundreds of thousands of dollars without blinking an eye. Malik had always admired the sleek beauty of the Rolls-Royce Ghost. The car symbolized more than just status. It was a testament to his journey, a reward for the sacrifices he had made along the way. As he stepped into the glass-walled dealership, the cool blast of air conditioning provided instant relief from the sweltering California sun. The high ceilings and gleaming floors gave the space an aura of sophistication. It was the kind of place where you could almost smell the wealth in the air. There it was, parked under the perfect spotlight, a jet-black Rolls-Royce Ghost, its paint shimmering like liquid obsidian. Malik's breath caught in his throat as he approached the car. He ran his fingers over the smooth surface, savoring the moment. This wasn't just a car to him. It was a symbol of how far he had come. He had grown up in South Central LA, where luxury was an unattainable fantasy. His childhood had been marked by struggle, single-parent household, underfunded schools, and a constant battle against systemic racism that made every step forward twice as hard. But Malik had always been a fighter. He had hustled his way through college on scholarships, internships, and sheer grit, eventually building a tech empire that revolutionized the way small businesses operated. Yet for all his success, he knew there were still places where people like him weren't welcome. The dealership was about to remind him of that. Across the room, two salespeople had noticed Malik's entrance. Chad, a tall, wiry man with slicked-back hair, nudged his colleague Erica, a striking woman in her early 30s, known for her sharp style and sharper tongue. They exchanged a glance that was both knowing and dismissive. Chad gave a subtle nod toward Malik's worn clothes, and Erica's eyebrows lifted ever so slightly in amusement. "He doesn't look like the type to buy this car," Chad muttered under his breath. Erica smirked, adjusting the strap of her designer handbag. "Probably here by mistake," she replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. With a show of mock professionalism, Chad sauntered over to Malik, who was still admiring the Rolls-Royce. His steps were measured, as if he were approaching a stray dog that had wandered into the wrong yard. "Can I help you with something?" Chad's tone was polite, but it had an unmistakable edge. Malik turned, unfazed by the man's condescension. "Yeah, I'm interested in this Rolls-Royce," he said evenly. "I'd like to take it for a test drive." The corners of Chad's mouth twitched, struggling to maintain his facade. Erica, who had now joined them, couldn't help but stifle a laugh. It was brief, but it was enough to make the message clear. They didn't take him seriously. "A test drive?" Erica asked, her voice sweet but laced with disbelief. She folded her arms and took a step closer, her designer heels clicking on the polished floor. "This car is over $400,000, she added, her eyes sweeping over Malik's casual attire, with thinly veiled disdain. "Are you sure you're looking at the right model?" Malik met her gaze calmly. "I know what I'm looking at," he said, his voice steady but firm. "And I'm ready to pay, in cash." The smugness on Chad's face was replaced by a flicker of surprise, but he quickly recovered. "In cash?" he repeated, his tone incredulous. He glanced at Erica, who raised an eyebrow. We don't get a lot of customers walking in, ready to drop that kind of money without financial documentation. Erica stepped closer, her voice lowering as if she were sharing a secret. You know, she said with a patronizing smile, we usually cater to a more familiar clientele. People who've bought from us before. Maybe you'd be more comfortable looking at something a little more accessible. Malik felt his patience wearing thin. He had encountered subtle racism before, but this was brazen. I'm not interested in anything else, he said, his voice now tinged with irritation. I want this car, and I'd like to test it before I buy it. Is that a problem? Chad's expression hardened. Look, we don't mean any offense, but we have policies. This car isn't for everyone. It's a powerful machine. Not just anyone can handle it. Malik's eyes narrowed. Not just anyone, he repeated, the weight of the insinuation hanging in the air. Erica's smile faltered, but she pressed on. You seem like a smart guy. You must understand. We're just trying to avoid disappointments. The tension between them was palpable. Malik's jaw clenched as he struggled to keep his composure. He knew exactly what was happening. They had judged him the moment he walked in, and now they were trying to push him out, dismissing him as someone unworthy of their time. Before Malik could respond, a security guard appeared in the doorway, his presence adding a layer of threat to the situation. Is there a problem here? The guard asked, his eyes flicking between Malik and the salespeople. Chad nodded toward Malik, a smug smile playing on his lips. We're just trying to clarify something, he said. Maybe you could help escort him outside? Malik's eyes flashed with anger, but he kept his voice steady. I'm not going anywhere, he said, but I'll make a call. He pulled out his phone, dialing a number. Chris, it's Malik. I'm at your dealership downtown, and I've got a situation. Both Chad and Erica froze. Malik's calm demeanor now unsettled them, especially as they realized who he was speaking to. I'll wait outside, Malik said, giving the security guard a cold glance before stepping out of the showroom. As Malik stepped outside the dealership, the heat of the Los Angeles sun hit him like a wave. He stood for a moment, taking deep breaths to calm the storm brewing inside him. He had dealt with racism and prejudice his entire life. But no matter how far he had come, no matter how much success he had achieved, there were always moments that reminded him of the challenges he still faced as a black man in America. The streets of downtown LA were bustling with activity. Cars honking, people rushing by, completely unaware of the drama unfolding in the luxury dealership behind him. Malik's phone buzzed in his hand, breaking his thoughts. He glanced at the screen and saw that Chris, the dealership's owner and a longtime friend, had texted him back. On my way. Don't go anywhere. Malik couldn't help but smirk. He had known Chris Thompson for years, long before either of them had found success. Chris, a white man born into wealth, had never had to fight the way Malik had. But despite their different backgrounds, they had always respected each other's journeys. Chris had built a reputation for being fair and inclusive, something Malik had always admired about him. As Malik waited, his mind drifted back to his younger years in South Central LA. He remembered the long days working part-time jobs while going to school, the late nights coding on an old second-hand computer in his tiny apartment. He had always been driven by a vision, a dream to build something that could change the world, and he had done it. His tech company, a revolutionary platform for small businesses, had made him a multi-millionaire by the time he was 35. But no amount of money could erase the biases he faced. As these thoughts churned in his mind, a sleek black SUV pulled into the dealership parking lot. Malik's heart rate quickened. not out of anxiety, but from the anticipation of what was about to happen. Chris stepped out of the car, his expression unreadable, but Malik could see the fire in his eyes. Chris wasn't the type to get involved in the day-to-day operations of his dealerships. He was a hands-off owner, trusting his managers to handle the business. But today, things were different. Malik had never called in a favor like this before, and Chris knew that if Malik was calling, it was serious. Malik watched as Chris marched into the dealership without a word. The glass doors swished shut behind him, leaving Malik alone with his thoughts. He could already imagine the shock on Chad and Erica's faces when they realized who he was and, more importantly, who he knew. Inside the dealership, the atmosphere had shifted from smug arrogance to palpable tension. Chad and Erica were still standing by the Rolls-Royce, exchanging nervous glances. They had expected Malik to leave quietly, maybe even slink away in embarrassment. Instead, they found themselves wondering why he seemed so calm, so confident, even after the way they had treated him. When Chris strode into the showroom, both Chad and Erica straightened up immediately. His presence commanded attention. He wasn't a large man, but there was an authority about him that made people take notice. Without acknowledging the salespeople, Chris scanned the room until his eyes landed on the Rolls-Royce. "Where is he?" Chris asked, his voice sharp. Chad, suddenly unsure of himself, gestured vaguely toward the door. Outside, I think," he mumbled. Erica tried to regain her composure, stepping forward with a bright smile. "Mr. Thompson, what a pleasant surprise. We were just helping a customer." Chris cut her off with a look that could stop a train. "Helping a customer?" he repeated, his voice low but filled with fury. "Do you call that helping?" Erica faltered, her smile wavering. "Well, there seems to have been a misunderstanding," she stammered. Chad, sensing the growing tension, tried to jump in. "Yeah, this guy didn't seem like the type who could afford—" "Stop talking," Chris snapped. His voice was cold, his eyes narrowing in on Chad and Erica. "Do you even know who you're talking about?" Both Chad and Erica were now visibly uncomfortable, shifting their weight and glancing at each other. "No. I mean, we didn't get his name," Erica said weakly. Chris stepped closer, his face inches from Erica's. "His name is Malik Johnson," he said slowly, each word cutting through the air. "He's the CEO of one of the most successful tech companies in the country. And in case you didn't know, he's also one of the key investors in this dealership." The words hit like a bombshell. Chad's face turned a sickly shade of pale, while Erica's eyes widened in disbelief. Malik Johnson? The same man they had just dismissed as some nobody? The reality of what they had done was beginning to sink in. "I want you both to apologize to him," Chris said, his voice hard as steel. "Right now." Erica was the first to recover, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Mr. Johnson, we're so sorry. We didn't realize. We didn't mean to offend you," Chad cut in, trying to salvage the situation. "It was just a misunderstanding." Malik, who had re-entered the showroom, stood by the door watching the two salespeople squirm. He didn't say anything at first, just letting the weight of their actions sink in. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm but firm. "I accept your apologies," Malik said, "but let's be clear. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was prejudice. You looked at me and you made assumptions, and you're not the first people to do that to me. But let's hope you've learned something today." Chad and Erica both nodded, too ashamed to meet Malik's gaze. Chris, still fuming, turned to Malik. "Malik, I'm so sorry this happened in my dealership. I swear, this is not how we do business." Malik gave a slight nod, appreciating Chris's sincerity. I know, Chris, but this is bigger than just today. This kind of thing happens all the time, to people like me. It needs to stop. Chris placed a hand on Malik's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity. You're right, and I'll make sure this never happens again. To anyone. The tension in the room began to dissipate as Chris led Malik over to the Rolls-Royce. So, do you still want to take it for a spin? Chris asked, trying to lighten the mood. Malik chuckled, his anger finally beginning to fade. Yeah, he said, a smile breaking across his face. Let's take it for a drive. As Malik settled into the driver's seat, the engine purred to life, its power palpable even at a standstill. The car was everything he had imagined and more. As they pulled out of the dealership, Malik glanced back at Chad and Erica through the rearview mirror. They were still standing in the showroom, their expressions a mix of shock and regret. Malik gripped the steering wheel of the Rolls-Royce Ghost, feeling the smooth leather beneath his hands. The weight of the vehicle was substantial, yet it glided effortlessly as he pulled onto the main road. Chris sat in the passenger seat, still visibly upset by what had transpired in his dealership. I can't believe they treated you like that, Chris muttered, shaking his head as they merged onto the boulevard. I'm going to fire both of them. They don't belong here. Malik glanced at Chris, the roar of the engine vibrating through the car. Chris, firing them isn't going to solve the real problem, he said, his voice calm but firm. This isn't just about them. It's about the mentality that makes people think it's okay to judge others based on how they look. They need to learn from this. Firing them won't teach them anything. Chris let out a long sigh. You're right, he admitted, rubbing his temple. But it just pisses me off that this happened in one of my stores. I've built this business on treating people with respect. I know, Malik replied, accelerating slightly as they approached an open stretch of road. The car responded instantly, its powerful engine surging forward with ease. But this happens to me all the time, man. No matter how much I achieve, I still get treated like I don't belong in certain spaces. I can walk into a room full of millionaires and be the only one who gets asked if I'm lost. Chris looked over at Malik, his expression one of deep frustration. That's messed up, and it's not fair. Malik smirked, his eyes still on the road ahead. No, it's not. But that's life. The key is not letting it get to you. You just keep moving forward. Keep showing them what you're made of. And eventually, they'll have no choice but to respect you. As they continued down the winding Los Angeles streets, the car handled like a dream. The luxurious interior was silent, save for the soft hum of the engine, and Malik found himself finally relaxing. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the city, and for a moment, everything felt right. This car was more than just a purchase. It was a symbol of his journey. From the streets of South Central LA to this moment, behind the wheel of one of the finest cars in the world, Malik turned onto a quieter street, enjoying the feel of the car as it effortlessly hugged the curves of the road. This is everything I hoped it would be, he said, a genuine smile breaking across his face. Chris chuckled beside him, finally letting some of the tension go. I knew you'd love it. There's nothing like driving one of these. As they neared the dealership, Malik slowed the car, allowing the moment to last just a little longer. He knew that once they returned, the reality of the situation would set back in. Conversations with the salespeople, ensuring they understood the gravity of their actions, and figuring out how to prevent something like this from happening again. But for now, he just wanted to enjoy the ride. When they pulled back into the dealership's lot, the showroom lights were now glowing brightly in the dusk. Chad and Erica were still inside, their faces pale and anxious as they saw Malik and Chris return. The Rolls-Royce coasted to a stop, and Malik turned off the engine, the sudden quiet inside the car almost deafening. "You want me to handle this?" Chris asked as they both got out of the car, his tone serious again. Malik shook his head. "No, I'll talk to them. They need to hear this from me." Chris nodded, stepping back as Malik walked toward the glass doors of the dealership. Inside, Chad and Erica straightened up, their nervous energy palpable through the glass. Malik paused for a moment at the door, taking a deep breath before stepping inside. The atmosphere was thick with tension as Malik approached them. Neither Chad nor Erica could meet his gaze, both of them looking down at the floor as if hoping it would open up and swallow them whole. Malik stood in front of them, his expression calm but resolute. "You two need to understand something," Malik began, his voice measured but firm. "This isn't just about me, and it's not just about today. What you did was make assumptions based on what I looked like, and that's not okay. You can't treat people like that and expect to get away with it." Erica opened her mouth to speak, but Malik held up a hand, stopping her. "I'm not here to hear excuses," he said. "I want you to think about what you did, and I want you to remember this moment. Because the next time someone like me walks through those doors, you better treat them with the same respect you'd give anyone else. You never know who you're dealing with. You never know someone's story." Chad nodded slowly, his face flushed with embarrassment. "We understand, Mr. Johnson. We're truly sorry." Erica echoed his sentiment, her voice barely above a whisper. "It won't happen again." Malik studied them for a moment, then nodded. "Good. I hope you both mean that." He turned to leave, but before he could walk away, Chris approached the group, his expression stern. "I'll be following up with both of you," Chris said. "We're going to have a serious talk about how you handle customers from now on. This business is built on respect, and I won't tolerate anything less." With that, Malik and Chris left the dealership, the tension slowly ebbing away as they stepped into the cool night air. Malik felt a sense of closure, knowing that he had made his point, but also aware that this was just one small victory in a much larger battle. As they walked back to Chris's car, Malik looked up at the stars beginning to twinkle in the darkening sky. "You know," he said quietly, "every time something like this happens, it reminds me why I do what I do. It's not just about the money. It's about breaking down these barriers, one step at a time." Chris nodded, his eyes reflecting the city lights. "And you're doing that, Malik, every single day." The two men stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the day finally lifting as they shared a moment of quiet understanding. Malik knew that there were still battles to be fought, but tonight he had won one more.